So now, Marilyn, you're on.
All right. Welcome.
George, can you speak a little louder when you speak in the future? You're fairly quiet on my computer and everyone else comes through well.
Okay, is this better, Phil?
A little bit,
Okay.
but thank you.
Well, welcome everyone to Car Safety, the end of fender benders. Before we get started and I turn on my slideshow, for those of you who are showing your faces, or if you want to do it on the chat, raise your hand. How many of you have ever had a fender bender or any kind of a traffic collision? Okay, we've got a few. Well, that's kind of the point of the talk today. We want to look at how technology is changing so that hopefully this will come to an end for us. So car safety, the end of fender benders. What we're going to do today, let me take you through a couple of steps here. Starting out with safe cars, save lives. So over 36,000 on average is what we lose every year in people killed through automobile crashes. And the good news is we have all these car makers now working on the systems here, what we're calling, sorry, I got somebody's voice coming through. Okay. So lucky for us that the car manufacturers are coming up with new technology to from adaptive cruise control so that we can maintain a distance from the car ahead of us so that we don't have those kinds of collisions, automatic emergency braking, letting us know if there's a pedestrian or a vehicle nearby. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to go through a brief timeline of some safety innovations, talk about what's available today. And that has a wide range because in some cases, automobile companies, for competitive reasons, go ahead and put in features to entice you to buy their vehicle. And in some cases, it's the government that has been mandating some features. And we're going to take just a quick look at some self-driving cars, because after all, who wants to give up their car keys? It is one of our goals, is to be able to maintain that kind of independence and drive. And then we're going to have an opportunity for how a safety feature helped you prevent an accident or damage to your car, or if you want to talk about a new feature that you have for those of you who have newer cars that you love, or you're like, whoa, I sure wish I had this before and I couldn't live without it now. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So I wanted to just kind of do a quick walkthrough on how we got to where we are today. So cars have been around since the 1890s, but shockingly, for 14 years, they didn't even have windshields. Can you just imagine? I know they went slow, but not having a windshield at all. It took 14 years. And even when they had windshields, they were just regular glass that would just shatter. Wipers didn't come until 1916. And even then you had to use a hand crank. They weren't electrified until the 1920s. Then if you look at this timeline, it's almost 40 years before you really start to see huge changes. Power brakes, the 60s were a time, power, everything power brakes. Remember the little, I think we all remember the windows, rolling up the windows, right? If you were the backseat, especially the kids, that was your job, roll up the windows. Alternating wipers. These things didn't become commonplace until the 1960s. And then airbags and car seats is actually one of the first times that the government mandated these safety features. And I think we can all remember how much pushback there was for these two particular safety features, particularly the car seats. And we've got another time lag again. And then you start having individual companies of cars like Nissan and Toyota, Volvo coming up with some of these features, some that we take for granted today, the backup camera, blind spot, the pre-collision system that Toyota is doing. But you know what? Sometimes it takes a while. So even though the 1940s had the power windows, it took a while. 60s for high profile cars, and not until the 80s and the 90s. That's 40-year gap. 1953, there were cars with power steering, but because the public liked them, then the automobile companies were putting them in. And then even then it took till 1960. So that one was a little bit quicker. Disc brakes, look how far back, 1902. But it's not until 1964 that you get a power braking system. And then the backup camera, 1956 in a concept car. And yet it didn't become mandatory in automobiles until in 2018 was the legislation for 2019 and 2020 vehicles. Now we move up to post backup cameras. Mandatory are going to be your backup. And it was 6 months later that the front one was also mandated. And then look at how quickly what is going on right now is just, they're just coming one right after another. Parking assist, adaptive cruise, the surround view cameras, your driver attention, your night vision, traffic sign recognition, automatic emergency braking, auto park. I mean, these are things that some of you might have in your cars right now, and some of you wish you had, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And what's in our future? We're moving toward driverless cars and highway autopilot. That would be the ultimate goal. So let's talk first about these new features. They're sometimes referred to as semi-autonomous driving because they're blending a lot of different ways and different kind of driver assistance programs so that you're still in the car at the wheel, but now you're getting a lot of help. Your eyes are on the road, your hands are on the wheel, but it's helping you. It's either sending you alerts, notices, you're getting warnings, and more, and this is called where we're at right now, sort of a level 2. And I'm going to show you the breakdown of how the automobile industry assigns these different levels and where we are. And you can think about where your car is on this scale. So a 0 scale, no automation whatsoever, you're doing everything. And unfortunately, some people are still driving cars like this. Then you get to the first level, driver assistance. They were small sort of things that started getting introduced into cars. Now we're at the point where most new cars are at level 2. There's some sort of partial automotion going on. You still have to be engaged. You've got to monitor everything at all times. We're moving toward level 3. You're in the car, you have to monitor, but you don't have to be eyes on at all times now. High automation and full automation. That's the goal at the end of the line. We may not get there in our lifetimes, but we're certainly going to be on level 2 and level 3. So one of the simpler ones that many of our cars have now is what's called the heads-up display. So what happens with some of these features, though, is that they can be turned off. And sometimes a new tool or a new feature might annoy you and you turn it off and go, I don't need that. I never had it before. If nothing else, trying to emphasize through this program today that there's a reason why we have these features. So let's take a look at them and see how they can help us. So the heads-up display, it's so that you don't have to be looking up and down from your dashboard or to a side screen. It shows up right on the glass of your window as a digital lighting. So for instance, a very simple one could be telling you what speed you're going. Something you want to keep an eye on when you're going through Oakmont. So you can have that 25 mile an hour show right up there on your windshield without you having to constantly look down and monitor and taking your eyes. That's the key thing, taking your eyes off of the road. There's some other ones. You can have your next turn navigation show up there. So various levels for every one of these features. Here's a great one. How often have we had that blinding when somebody else's high beams are shining in your face? This particular one on the automatic high beams, the default for it is that your high beams are on all the time, but your car uses a camera or sensors, and anytime it senses another oncoming car, it can automatically go back to regular beam and then pop back up to high beam again. I think a lot of us would agree that at night, it would be great if your high beams could be on all the time. You can see a lot better. But the distracting feature of turning them on and off, again, takes away from when you're trying to pay attention to your night driving. So this just does it all for you. And adaptive headlights. Your headlights on your cars right now generally only point straight. Adaptive headlights will also illuminate the area to the right and to the left, and it has some ability to swivel. And I think that you can see sometimes on the newer model cars, you will start to see that the headlight actually wraps around a little bit to the side fender. Here's a great one, driver attention monitor. It actually is tracking your eye movements. So if you're getting sleepy or you're constantly turning to the side to talk to someone or reaching down for something in your car, it can detect all of that and send you a warning. It's also possibly could help with whatever the reason is that you're not alert, whether you've had too much to drink. Maybe there's some interference with your medication and it's making you drowsy. A very important one as we age, keeping your attention on the road. The forward collision one, this is the one that's supposed to help us not have those fender benders anymore. So it's going to use a combination of things, the cameras, radar, lasers, and detecting other cars. And then depending on what level you have, it could be as simple as sending you a warning signal, something that you would hear. It could be something that shows up on your heads up display, shows you pedestrians, bicyclists. So these warning systems, it is likely to be the next government mandated feature in cars, because it can also allow for emergency braking in case you're not responding, the car will do it for you. Adaptive cruise control. Cruise control has been around in cars for quite some time, but the adaptive ones can actually think for you and engage on its own. Again, it's using a combination of cameras, radar, sensors, so it can reduce your speed. When we think about oftentimes when you're caught in traffic and you sometimes look and you go, what's going on over here? Why are we all like slowed down? And then we're, when people are changing lanes. But if all of our cars could respond to what's going on around and match it, if everybody was going at the same time, technically you wouldn't even need to change lanes to get around a slower driver. So one other nice feature. And some of them on the adaptive cruise control will adapt totally to the surrounding traffic and even take over for you. Stay in your lane. So here's this is just one screenshot where you can see that it's letting you know what's going on and a warning you that there's an approaching object. So there's something at the top front corner of the driver's side of the car. So it could be a bicycle that's coming toward you. It could be a pedestrian, a crosswalk that you may not see, and you're going to get an alert. So it could be on your screen. It could also give you an audible alert. So some of the more sophisticated ones, when you think about what it takes to keep you in your lane. So there are three here that I wanted to touch on. The lane centering keeps you in your lane, and it's using the camera. Then when you get to the lane departure, this is letting you know, and it's looking at the markers on the road. when it sees that a car is coming too close, it issues a warning. So possibly somebody next to you is wanting to change lanes and get in front of you, pass you, and you're in their blind spot. So a combination of both of our cars had all the features, that would be great. But even if that person doesn't have theirs and you're in their blind spot, you at least are going to get a warning that that person is coming over, because you might not have been paying attention that somebody behind you is trying to pass you. Now, the more advanced ones will signal you to steer back, and some of them will actually nudge you back in. The lane keeping one goes beyond that. It's a little more intrusive. It actually uses your steering system to put you back into your lane. Independent braking capability is there. And then here's one: if you haven't been using your turn signal like you should, if you don't use your turn signal, it won't let you change the lane. So how does a lot of this work? More and more of the cameras that are coming with the cars, the front, the back, the sensors. So all together, what it's doing is piecing all this information together, and you're going to get a 360 all around your car, which is really helpful too when it comes to parking. Who doesn't want some help parking? How many times might you have not seen that post in a parking garage? Or maybe backed up and not seen that light pole that was in the parking lot. So these cameras are going to help you avoid that, avoid a shopping cart, avoid people behind you. And another great one for us as we age is the night vision. So two types. We've got the passive system, and that can see heat. So it can see someone late at night. It can see an animal darting across the road. And then the active system is using infrared light, and it projects something ahead that we can't see, but it's going to gather data and then display images on a monitor. In an ideal situation, you're going to have the passive system and the active system, because they each have downsides, but working together. That's going to go a long ways for us to be able to continue driving at night. Here's a great one. So traffic sign recognition. The camera is taking in the information of what it sees for traffic signals up ahead. So your stop sign, your yield sign, that there's a pedestrian crossing or a school zone. And it's reading that and then transmitting that image to you. It could be in your heads-up display. It also works as a backup. So if you've missed a critical sign, say a stop sign coming up, so that you wouldn't blow through a stop sign without at least getting an alert that you're about to do that. And here's a fun one that we're all going to love: the parking assist systems. So again, it's going beyond. You find your space. It's as we advance with this, beyond all the cameras and you being able to do this yourself now with more help, so that you don't hit a pole or something behind you, or it's hard to get around that post in a parking garage. Some of them will actually help steer it for you. And then here's the great one. Isn't this going to be great when it finds the spot and then parks it for you? Here's another one. You can, and the more advanced one that's coming, you summon your parked car to a location that you want. So let's say you can't find a parking spot at the grocery store on a busy day and you're all the way down at the end and it's raining. You will be able to call up your car to just come and get you right in front of the Safeway. So kind of like whistling for your horse to come. This is just a mishmash. I pulled together what some of the car companies are calling their new features. Now, Volvo's had their features for a really long time. Some other cars are really starting to come on board a little bit later. But if you see some of the commonality in the words, pilot is very popular, and you'll see assist in there. So that's an autopilot. It's trying to help you. You're the pilot of your car. So we'll talk a little bit about self-driving cars. Again, when I talked about how long things take, 1939, GM's Futurama exhibit, the World's Fair, envisioned cars that drive themselves. And here we are, all these years later, we still haven't quite achieved that, but we're working on it. So the look ma no hands is actually what I like to call what we're moving along to. So we have those 6, I'll show you again that slide, the 6 stages of the different levels, but all kinds of engineers are working on this. And it is a challenge because a car can drive itself on a well-maintained road. But what about the ones that are not well maintained? What about ones that might not have those lane markings? So we have a ways to go, but we're going to transition. There will be times when obviously the first stage will be, you'll be able to have a self-driving car that works on the highway. And that would be a great step, or on your regular roads around town that are in good condition and well marked. So the car can do anything that the engineer asks of it. I found this one little problem that I thought was kind of funny. So the self-driving car was following a truck that had its truck bed full of traffic signs being delivered to a construction site. And the car had no idea what to do. So there are still going to be those instances. One of the big things that's going to happen though are 50 sets of state level laws to adapt. And they're all going to have to agree on this. And there has to be a commonality across the nation on what our roads are like. And especially we have commonality with the traffic signs now, but there's going to have to be increased steps. And there will probably be differences in what we're used to seeing now in terms of the kind of paint and the way that lanes are designated and striped. Some of those things might be changing for us in order to be able to let these cars read signals in a different way than they currently do today. So again, here's those different automation levels. We are at, for sure, 0 and 1. We have 2s for many vehicles now, and some of them were moving closer to step number 3. And all of these slides are going to be available on the Future website, so you can go back and look at these in more detail. Well, what are the Jetsons driving? Audi has come up with this concept car called the Grand Sphere. So for self-driving, it's level 4. Take a look at that on the left-hand side, that dashboard. That whole little steering wheel can just go away. It goes and gets stored back into that dash. And then if you look on the right-hand side, it's gone. So part of what they're in the automobile business. They don't want you to not have a car, but they're looking at the car as a new experience. It's just a vehicle that takes you from point A to point B, and you are living in it during that time period in luxurious accommodations, and you don't have to do anything. It's a concept car, but that's how so many of these features came about. They came about in concept cars over the years. So in conclusion, while you may be able to own a self-driving car in your lifetime, it may be further away than the advancing technology would indicate. So what can we do in the meantime? Take a look at your car manual. You all have them. You got your car, you got your manual, and maybe the first day or two you looked at some features and then you put your manual away. I would encourage you to take it out again and take a look and see what kind of features your car already comes with, and make sure that you're familiar with them. And it helps for one thing at a time. For instance, if you have a heads-up display and you haven't been using it, turn it on, get used to it, and then once you feel comfortable with that one feature, move on to the next feature. so that over time, these things are hitting us, one new thing, one new thing, one new thing. It's a lot to take in. So get used to it a little bit at a time. The other thing that's a big leap that people have had to get used to is there's less and less of you looking on your dashboard and more of you looking at a screen that right now is to the right of your dashboard, right? So you have your steering wheel and your dashboard, and now you have the screen to look at. But ultimately, what the car engineers are trying to do is this is going to come over here eventually, and all you're going to have is something right in front of your face. But we're just not there yet. So if you don't want to give up your car keys and you have a car that has none of these features, you might want to consider purchasing or leasing a newer vehicle that has advanced safety features. It'll keep you being able to maintain your independence and drive longer, and most importantly, safer. I've got a couple of sources there for you if you want to go back and get some more detailed information. So I'm going to conclude that part of the slideshow, and we're going to open it up first with anybody who has an example, who has a car that has some of these newer features and has had an incident where that has saved the day for them. So if anybody has something to share, if you want to either raise your hand or put it in the chat box, and George will be monitoring the chat box.
I'll be monitoring to the best I can. Chat box is clearly the best place to put something. And if you don't want to volunteer, you can always come in with a question or a comment.
And if you want to do that, just raise your hand, or we can, and then we can unmute you.
Okay, looks like Nancy has a comment and she's unmuted.
That's a question. I like the idea of potentially maybe leasing or renting. I'm not sure. Our cars are old at this point. They're 2011 and 13. The 13 is a Volvo and it doesn't have any of this fancy stuff. So it's come on since then. When does it make sense to get rid of an older car like that and lease a newer one instead of buying a new one? Anybody know?
Leasing versus buying is something that you would really want to look into. I'm leasing right now for the first time in my life, but that's only because I'm leasing an electric car, and technology is changing so fast that I decided to lease. I'm not sure that that necessarily is as important for a non-electric car. Anything newer than 2018. So Nancy, you're saying you don't even have backup cameras. So think of it this way. What's the value of being able to drive safer longer and not have to turn in my keys? One of the things to consider too, it's a little tough right now to buy a car, especially an electric car. But when you are shopping around and when you do want to look at a car, what you're probably interested in now are these safety features. So make sure that at a dealership, they're showing you what these safety features are. And particularly if you buy a car, make sure that they're taking the time to walk you through so that you understand some of these most important safety features before you leave the dealership.
But your comment about electric and the changes, that also may appear with non-electric and just ordinary cars. So how long, what's the shortest lease time? We leased a car years ago and ended up buying it. We haven't leased one since. What's a short period of time if you want to take advantage of new changes, so you don't want a long lease? If you were to lease any car and see what's coming down the road.
A shorter lease is considered 3 years, but you'd probably want to check with a dealer.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
Barbara Dudley is making the comment that her 2007 Prius does have a backup camera. So older cars can have some of these features, the big changes with regard to lane, you stay in the same lane, stopping for the car ahead of you before you hit it, all those things are in fact new. Okay. Bill has some other side comments.
We have a 2018 Subaru Outback, and some of the lane assist stuff really throws me for a loop because it does things completely unexpected. Like if a car in front of you is braking a little bit to turn, and I plan to just get a little closer, and I'm talking like 50 feet in front of you, not like there's an imminent collision, and I'm just going to go around it, and all of a sudden the car starts braking hard. It really works against you, and the lane, keeping you in the lane where it steers for you to get you back in, has caught me by surprise a number of times, and so much to the point where I really don't like to drive with the system on because it works against me. And there was one time where I was doing a merge and I was paying attention to the wrong car. My wife got my attention in time, so I was able to brake and swerve to avoid the car in front of me, but my car didn't do it.
Well,
Can
so
you
this
turn
is
the assist off? Philip, when you're,
it's not so much that he has it off, but this is another thing that with anything else, you have to test out these features, and it's what you're saying in one instance, Phil, it sounded like you wanted to go around this car that was slowing down to make a right-hand turn, and
Yes.
and your system was reacting to you probably being impatient and wanting to go around him. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, I guess that would be the case, but to me, the car was so far in front of me that, I mean, it wasn't like there was an imminent collision because it wasn't stopped or going that slow.
But I
You
think
know,
probably what's happening is it's taking in a lot of information, including senses and maybe knowing how fast you had just been going. So I mean, again, it's going to take time, and you might want to just, in a sense, practice some of these features so that you're comfortable with it. You don't want to get to, and this is when I mentioned before with the heads up display, you don't want a safety feature to annoy you to the point that you turn it off.
So how do I get around when there was nobody around, no other car on the road and no obstructions, and it just braked? That one was another really kind of scary thing. Not a super hard brake.
It's possible that you didn't see something, but it did.
I don't know what it would have seen because there was nothing there, but okay.
Right.
I think what we're reflecting on here is a classic reason for having this discussion. That all of these features are being introduced. And as Marilyn said earlier, a good idea is to get used to them one at a time and understand when you want to use them, when you don't. So for example, some of the lane features are things that, to my understanding, some of the younger people I know who have them only turn them on when they're doing long distance driving. Okay. If I'm on a long distance haul on 80, probably a good idea to have something that keeps me in the lane. Okay. But you need to get familiar with all these things. And the truth of the matter is that other people are going to be making these adjustments. And at some point, they're going to become integrated into what we buy when we buy a car or rent a car. And they are intended for safety. So
Another point,
you do what they're doing, okay, there is a logic behind it.
because another point is, right, we're not the only person on the road. So I could be the safest driver in the world, but I can't control what everybody else is doing around me. So think about these kinds of innovations. It's working two ways. It's working for me, but it's also working to make the other driver safer too. Sandra had a question about, do the cars help with the difficulty seeing curbs? Yes, that's what a lot of these sensors in the cameras, as they're getting more sophisticated, particularly the ones that have a parking assist, is looking at the curb. Like for instance, the front forward camera, it could seem like such a simple thing, but we didn't have that on our older Camaro. And because it sits low to the ground, if we didn't see that front curb and stop at enough time, it caught on that curb. And then when you pulled away, it would torque that front bumper constantly. Now we've got a newer model that has that. So that's great. That's just something really simple. But how many of you have ever been in a parking lot and forgot, didn't see it, and drove over that bumper, right? That's not great for your car. That's a very simple one for a front camera to take care of. Just that one thing right there. If you've ever had like one thing that went wrong that could get fixed, that's kind of what we're moving toward. But think about the more important one, the saving the lives, yours and someone else's.
As for me, the thing that has driven me down this path has been having the cross-traffic signal when I'm backing a car up. When I park in Oliver's and then I start backing out of that parking lot, boy, it is awfully nice to know whether there's cross traffic or somebody walking. And it goes beyond just what I can see in my rear mirror or camera. Okay? The signal pops.
I love that backup camera with that cross traffic. That's a very good feature. And I also like the, what do you call the feature with the cruise control where it adjusts your speed for you? That's really neat too.
That's the adaptive cruise control. Philip, we want to hear from you a year from now when you say, I love that lane monitoring feature on my car.
I'd be happy to tell you whether I still hate it or if I'm adjusting to it or what the deal is.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, Bob, and then Nancy.
So Bob, if you can unmute yourself.
Somebody's
Phone is ringing.
That's yours?
Okay, yeah. Couple things. One is that you were talking earlier about learning about these things and having maybe lease a car. The other thing you can do is just rent a car for a couple weeks or a month and learn all about that.
Wait just a second. I can't tell who's, oh, that was my phone. All right. Bob, you're on.
Okay, so I was suggesting if you want to find out what the new features, how they work, you don't have to lease a car. You can actually go out and rent a car for maybe a couple weeks or a month. And almost all the new rental cars have got most of these features. We rented a car just a month ago or so, and it had a good portion of the features we're discussing today. Another thing you're talking about, going to the owner's manual and the glove compartment and finding out how the features work. I found that the owner's manual basically covers everything, but may not all be included in your car. So sometimes it's really confusing to try and go through the owner's manual and see how to do something. Yet it's for every car that they make, not necessarily just the car that you've got yourself. Got a 2017 Subaru, and I think I've probably got about 2/3 of the safety features that you discussed today. I really love that car. It's really great. Thank you.
My question was, is there any way to get a succinct, maybe a list or something of the different brands out there and what features they have? How do you choose which car you might want?
I think almost all of the cars have got these features. It just depends how many of the options you want to buy. Usually a basic strip model is the cheapest car for any given model, but then if you want to spend a little bit more, they'll start adding some of the safety features. There are a number of safety features which are required by law, and so all the cars will have that, which starts with basically the backup camera and so on like that.
And then Nancy, you've got to realize too that that's why that one word cloud I had on there, different car companies are calling different things, right?
No.
Until it's a mandated safety feature, until it's mandated and they have some standardization, whether somebody calls it power assist and somebody else, you know, Ford has a whole line, they're just calling it Ford Blue, which doesn't tell you a whole lot, right? So you have to go and look at the cars and look at what the features are. The ones that I gave you and the acronyms I gave you are pretty much those generic ones, right? LTA, you know, that's, you know, your lane one. The car company could call it something a little jazzier, but should still be referring to that acronym. But you're starting to see now huge lists of what the car companies are giving you as options, and it's gotten very competitive.
Gee, when
And
we
you
bought
can-
our 2013 car, we said, maybe this will be the last car we ever buy. Now we need a new one.
Only if you want to keep your car keys.
Yeah, well, I do. So far, not that old yet.
Not even keys now, they're fobs, right?
That's true.
Right. Eventually, I mean, great, your fob, you just hold up your fob and your car comes to you.
Did you ever see the warning that if you're in like a parking lot or whatever, telling women to put their key between their fingers and so they can use it as a safety device? Somebody attacks them, can't do that with a fob.
Okay, if there's nothing more at this, thank you all for joining us. And
I've got
we'll-
another question.
Okay,
So with all these safety features, are there sensors in various places of the car? So you have a minor fender bender, either your own doing or somebody else does it for you. They bend your bumper or whatever. I'm assuming you're gonna have to spend the oodles of money to replace this stuff. Does anyone have any knowledge or comment on better vehicles or costs and all that?
Don't have an answer for you on that, Phil, but of course, yes, you'd have to get that repaired.
On my Subaru, I had a cracked windshield that had the eyesight capability in it. And so that was a big concern. And it was going to cost $1,000 to have the windshield replaced, largely because of the calibration for the eyesight thing. But it ends up that my insurance covered 100%. I thought that was really cool.
And that might be something too, Phil, when we look at what the government mandate things are. As some of these are features that are necessary and not luxuries, insurance companies are going to have to move along with the times. And if your car is damaged, and that means your backup camera, your sensors are damaged, I don't think an insurance company is going to be able to say, well, you know what, Phil, I don't know. It's a lot of money. We're not going to cover that, right? It's the same thing, but look at what your windshields. If your windshield is broken with the safety glass, you know, now that we have safety glass in them, that's just mandated. Your insurance company has to cover that for you. And then just Nancy, I just wanted one more thing about the key fob because I forgot about that. Aren't key fobs great on the, if you've got the one that won't let you lock yourself out of your car? I mean, that's just something simple. How many of you have ever locked yourself out of your car in your entire life of driving, right? You know, that's
did
just
once.
something pretty simple. And so hopefully as we move along on some of these features, we're going to embrace them all. But it is going to take time and it is an adjustment. So you want to do these incrementally until you feel comfortable with it. But I thank everybody for your attention today. I don't know
Thank
that
you.
George has a speaker lined up for next month yet, but stay tuned and he will certainly let us know with an email.
okay.
So,
Bye all.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.